All right. So it is 7 o'clock, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the regular city council meeting for Minnetrista, May 1st. Happy May Day. So with that, first order of business, reminder, everybody turn your cell phones off or on silent, and then also join me for Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I'll start with introductions. I'm Lisa Whalen, I'm the mayor. We have with us this evening council members Kathleen Refkin, Ann McGregor, and Peter Vickery. And we also have our engineer with WSB, Allison Fauski. We have our director of public works, Gary Peters, and then Ali Paulfus, who is our director of administration. And then Jasper Krugel is absent this evening. And then we have Brian Grimm, our finance director. David Abel is our community development director. And then Sarah Sansala is our legal counsel with Kennedy and Graven. And then we have Paul Falls, who is our chief of police. So welcome all of you. We don't have an audience except for maybe later on, people watching on YouTube. Next is approval of our agenda. Are there any changes or additions? If none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Refkin. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Vickery. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes. This evening we have two special presentations. We're going to start out with our chief of police, I think.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. So tonight I'm just going to go through a few slides here rather quickly, just to give you an update as to where we're at for activity for the year 2022. Certainly, if you have questions as I'm going along, feel free to interrupt me and I'll answer them the best I can. So, Brian, I'll just have you. You're on the right slide already. So in 2022, we had 5,280 incident complaint reports, or ICRs as we call them. Basically, that accounts for anything that we do a report on. So that would include calls for service is the majority of that. It also includes anything that would be self-initiated that requires a report. So things like traffic stops, whether there's a citation or a warning, things like that. It does not include things like if someone asks directions or phone calls, little petty things like that would not be included in these numbers. So this is up just slightly from last year. I anticipate that this number will continue to increase fairly significantly now from this year forward. One thing that's probably important to note is obviously 2019, 20, and even parts of 21, we were short-staffed. And then we also saw the results of COVID, where the self-initiated activity was very, very low compared to a normal year. So we're kind of coming out of that, back to full staff and also getting back to normal operations. So a couple other things to point out, that number averages out to about 14 incidents per day. Obviously, it doesn't always work out that way. Some days you have nothings, other days you have more than that. So just depends how that goes. Our overall clearance rate for these ICRs is 97%, which means that's the vast majority of these issues are resolved. Tickets issued, there's an increase from last year. You can see that we had a total of 1,445 tickets, which includes both warnings and citations. You can see the breakdown there, 961 warnings, 484 citations. That's a pretty good split, I think. People are using good discretion. It doesn't always, every violation doesn't necessarily need to result in a citation, so we try to warn people as best we can, but there are circumstances where a citation is just simply in order. And I anticipate this number to increase pretty significantly as well once we get back up to full staff. And Officer Josh Brown, that hopefully will be swearing in at the next meeting, is back with us, as you're aware, and he he likes to go out and be very self-initiated. So he's going to help these numbers. So that's a good
Okay,
thing.
so watch your speed, right?
Yes. And we'll get to why that's
Josh
important.
is back in town.
Right.
Citations, the fines, did that go back into your budget, correct?
A portion of it does. Not a lot of it, but a portion of it does, yes.
Do you know,
It certainly doesn't offset our costs, but it helps.
Chief, do you know is it 20% or?
I don't believe so. I think it's closer to 10%.
Yeah, I knew it was pretty
Yeah, it's pretty low.
insignificant, yeah.
Yeah, and that varies a little bit depending from year to year, depending on a number of factors that I won't bore you with right now. But,
Okay,
next slide. I always like to tell people, we hear a lot, well, don't you have anything better to do than stop cars? And so one of the most important things I think a police department can do for a community is to be visible, and one of the best ways to do that is to be out making traffic stops. And it's hard to be more visible than that, other than driving through neighborhoods. We certainly do all that as well. But as you can see, our traffic crashes are up very significantly in 2022 over 2021. And there's a breakdown there. I won't go through all of these. We did have one fatality, unfortunately. We don't get those every year. Some years we get multiple. So obviously our goal is to eliminate that number. We had 22 personal injury crashes. We get a lot of animal involved crashes just due to the nature of our rural area. Property damage crashes obviously are the most common, and then vehicle off-road, that's mostly winter weather related, along with a lot of the property damage. So I mean, some of this is just indicative of the number or the volume of traffic we're getting in our city. It's not all just because of our city. If we didn't grow in other residents over the next 10 years, these numbers would probably still continue to climb up because everybody around us is growing as well. So it's not just our residents, but all the traffic coming to and going through our city. So traffic enforcement obviously is the goal of that is to get these numbers down. Next page, arrests. These numbers actually went down just a little bit from 21 to 22, which is good. I won't go too much into detail here, but when we say arrest, that's the definition of an arrest. It doesn't mean that all 78 of these went to jail in handcuffs. It's just that was the end result. Some of these happen that way, where they do go to jail. Some happen where the arrest warrant is issued later and they're charged through the court and so on and so forth. But that number went down a little bit. This number tends to go up and down. So hopefully we can keep that number fairly low. In addition to that, obviously everybody that we arrest, we fingerprint. In addition to that, we completed 82 civil fingerprints. So there's quite a demand for that service. We do charge a $20 fee, which kind of covers the staff time involved in civil fingerprints. But there's all kinds of reasons, adoption, job requirements, so on and so forth. So we only fingerprint, obviously, residents of St. Bonnie or Minnetrista. But that's people are very happy that we provide that service. Next slide, criminal investigations. This number went down 1%, which is pretty minor. So we had 83 Part 1 crimes, which are the more serious crimes. You can see the definitions there under Part 1 and Part 2. They're all serious. Obviously, Part 1 are the most serious. So we had 83 of those, and then we had 181 Part 2 crimes that we investigated as a department. Some of those are fairly quick. The vast majority of these are very, very time consuming. So I would like to point out that our clearance rate, our criminal clearance rate for cases is 58%, and that is well above the state average. So that's a number I'm very proud of. I think our staff really does an excellent job at following up on cases and doing everything they can to resolve those as best they can. There are agencies across the state that that number might be far lower, and there might be more work that can be done. They just can't do it because they don't have the staff or the time, because the volume is just so high. So we're fortunately in a good place where we're able to spend the time to do this as best we can, and as a result, our clearance rate is much better.
Paul, do you also then, does the clearance rate include those criminal investigations that you might have to share, like with the sheriff's department, to help you out with some of that, or?
That's a good question, Madam Mayor. The Sheriff's Department actually does not really assist us with any of our investigations, I don't believe we had a single case they assisted with in 2022.
Okay.
If we were to get a homicide or something large in nature where there was a lot of follow-up involved, in other words, if you have a complex homicide, not all homicides are really complex, with a lot of people involved and a lot of leads to follow up on, we'd certainly reach out to them to get some staffing assistance. But we didn't have to do that in 2022.
Okay.
And the sheriff's department is unfortunately very short-staffed as well.
They're
so
short-staffed as
they've
well.
been-
Yeah.
They've been good about letting us know that, hey, if you really need help, we can do it, but we're kind of struggling to keep up on our own. That does not include, these numbers do not include anything to do with drug task force, which I'll get to in a minute. So our next page is drug task force. This is just kind of a snapshot of the cases that we had in 2022, and this is just the West Metro Drug Task Force. So this doesn't include, there's an East Metro, there's a Southwest Metro. This is just our agency that works out in the West Metro, including us and the other departments involved in this. So we had 82 search warrants, 50 arrests, which are not included in that number I just shared with you. That's in addition to that number. There were 38 charges. I think I should point out that a lot of the low-level stuff, we don't necessarily charge if the subject is willing to work with the drug task force. They'll dismiss the charge if they provide some reliable information that we can use to go after a bigger player or subject. So a lot of that is what keeps this going, and it helps us to kind of break it down into the communities that affect us. So that's an important piece. Firearms, obviously that's a big topic these days. They recovered 84 firearms. I anticipate that number will continue to increase on an annual basis, just because now we're starting to see a lot of ghost guns, which are, they can just create these things. They don't have to go buy them legitimately or illegally. They can just literally make these things in their house if they get the right equipment. So we're seeing more of those. Marijuana, 216.5 pounds of marijuana, 93.5 pounds of cocaine, and 324 grams of fentanyl, which, as we all know, is a very deadly substance when not used appropriately. So,
When used.
so all of that was taken off the street in 2022. You can see the picture there is an example from one of the 2022 search warrants. That's just a bunch of marijuana. There's some cocaine and a little bit of fentanyl. And then if you can see this, here is a stack of cash. That's important because our drug task force is completely funded by forfeiture dollars. So when we go in and do search warrants and find large amounts of cash like that, that money's just put back into the fund to fund these operations, taking the burden off of taxpayers. So that's an important piece. And as technology improves, we'll have to find ways to evolve along with that, because a lot of these drug dealers are figuring out that, hey, don't keep cash, use accounts, use cryptocurrency, electronic currency, things like that. So we'll have to make sure that we stay up to speed on that in order to keep interrupting this, because that's the whole idea, is you can shut this operation down and this problem goes away for a while. So at least from this supplier.
Are those numbers, the seizures, are those higher than last year?
Some of them are. There's the methamphetamine number. I didn't get a final on that, so I didn't include it. That number isn't, because I think it was last year. It was either 21 or 20 that we had the record seizure for methamphetamine in one search warrant. And that was for the entire state. It was, I believe it was just over 300 pounds of methamphetamine. So these numbers do go up and down. You're gonna start to see probably a lot less marijuana because of the county attorney isn't very keen on charging marijuana cases. So we'll see how that goes. Certainly they're gonna seize large amounts of marijuana, but but we'll see what happens with the direction put out by the county attorney's office, because that might dictate whether or not this is a thing to focus on and maybe just go after other things. But
Not drug task force related, but I've also heard that there's some disgruntlement about any kind of the county attorney charging and moving forward with certain cases. Is that, have we been kind of experiencing that?
I think we have collectively. Certainly the Hennepin Chiefs and Minnesota Chiefs are very well aware of this issue, more the Hennepin Chiefs, but
Right.
it's a big enough issue where both organizations are aware of it and are trying to address it. This current county attorney definitely has a different viewpoint on charging certain crimes, whether you're a juvenile or not. You know, and everybody's entitled to their opinion, but ultimately, if you're committing heinous crimes, there needs to be justice, and just
Right.
simply saying someone's a juvenile and not charging it is certainly not justice, in my opinion. But so we'll stay on top of that as well. Fortunately, all these organizations, Hennepin Chiefs and State Chiefs, are very, very engaged, both at the county level and at the state level with the legislature. So hopefully they'll stay on top of that, and there will be some kind of a compromise, and we'll be able to move forward
Okay.
in a fashion that just makes sense. All right, next slide. Lake Minnetonka SWAT team, I won't spend a lot of time on this. As you know, this is a culmination of a number of surrounding agencies. We currently still have 3 officers on this team. They only had 1 call out last year, which is good. I think the most we've ever had is 3 or 5 in a year, which is good. It's not super common for us. I think what we have seen, though, as a result of putting this team together is all of these officers that are on this team are out working the road in the surrounding communities. And so a lot of these things that used to require a call out don't anymore, because if they can get 4 or 5 of these individuals together, they can handle things without a full call out. So that number is a bit deceiving. That particular call out did occur in our city. So, and as a result of having this team, the situation was brought under control without incident. And so this worked exactly the way it was designed to work. So the vehicle you see in the back is the MRAP. You've seen that before. I think we've had that to Trista Day a couple of times. That's also can be used for emergency response with flooding or what have you. So that's a multi-purpose vehicle. So it's nice to have. It didn't cost us anything. We got it free through the military, and then through some grants we got it painted and so forth. But that is a bulletproof vehicle, so it's nice to have, because I can remember a couple of calls years ago that we didn't have something like that, which made it really dangerous to be able to get close to a residence and deal with a situation where there were shots fired. So there are no questions on that. I'll move along to the next.
I think we have a question.
Have you seen
Oh, yeah.
an increase or any of like the fake SWAT calls on residents?
Did you say fake SWAT calls?
Yeah, this, what, I think it's
Yes, they
called
call that swatting. Yes, that is, we actually had that a couple of weeks ago. So swatting is essentially calls can come, they can be spoofed and come from, more times than not, they don't even come from the United States. They call it a very serious incident, a school shooting, an active shooter in a business, something like that. We actually had one that was reported to have occurred at the townhomes in Woodland Cove. And so there was a very large response that went there, quickly figured out it was a swatting incident and not a real incident. So very fortunate, but obviously the risk with that is when you think you have a very serious call like that, you've got lots of people responding quickly, which adds risk. I mean, just responding to a call like that adds risk. You've got lots of officers, lots of equipment needed to deal with that appropriately, and there's just, it increases the likelihood of an accident. So we don't like to see those.
The cost too, it's just useless.
Yes, and there isn't a lot that can be done about it because the calls cannot be traced. So unfortunately, that for whatever reason, that seems to be a thing that we're dealing with more and more. Fortunately for us, we don't deal with it quite as much because that tends to happen more in cities that have very large venues. But it can happen anywhere, as we found out a couple of weeks ago. So, good question. Okay. Permits, gun permits. So this number kind of ebbs and flows. It tends to go up in the years where there's a lot of discussion around gun control, because people are afraid that they're going to stop allowing people to purchase guns. So we see these numbers skyrocket one year, and then as that dies down, they'll tend to back off a little bit, but, so we had 91 applications in 2022 as compared to 121 the year before. So not too drastically different. And then 2 special event permits. Special events, we used to see a lot more numbers than this, but because I think our area is growing and getting busier traffic-wise, a lot of these events are tending to try and pick areas that are more easily used without disturbing everything. It's getting harder and harder for them to run these events in some of our areas, so we're seeing less of these special event permits come through. The only reason I point out these permits is because this is just another indication of all the staff time. Our investigator does all these background checks for the permits, so it's just that on top of all the other criminal investigations is very time consuming. And certainly you have to make sure that you're taking the time to do this correctly, because it wouldn't be very difficult to miss something. So you want to make sure when you issue a gun permit that that person is not disqualified for any reason. Next slide, volunteer reserve officers. So we only have, well, I think we're down to 1 volunteer reserve officer. As I've mentioned, I think in years past, it's getting more and more difficult to find volunteers. We're trying to, one of our new officers has recently been assigned as a reserve coordinator, so we're trying to get him to try and maybe take a little different approach and be creative with trying new ways to recruit volunteers. Fortunately, we have Crown College not far away that has a criminal justice program that so we've been lucky enough to get some volunteers from in the past. It's kind of difficult, though. A lot of people don't want to commit time when they're in the middle of full-time school. So I think we are down to just 1, and that's a challenge that I think everybody's facing. But we're still happy to have that individual and hope to add some more throughout the year. We've changed a number of things because we had some pretty strict requirements on time commitments that we found are just they're not realistic, and so I think hopefully we can find a few more. We've also talked about looking at an Explorer program, which is entirely different.
Right.
That's much younger age, but with the Explorer program, that is a much more organized system, so it puts a lot of requirements on us. So it's very staff intensive, and I don't think we're quite there yet. We'll have to look into that, see where that goes. So I think that is the last of my slides, unless you have any other questions.
Good presentation, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Paul.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
like I said, I think it's always good to have it on camera in front of our viewing audience, especially since they really don't know, I think, what our police department does. And you guys do a great job, so thank you very much for your service to our community. And I know our residents appreciate it, as does the entire council. So thank you.
Thank you.
So next, Brian, so let's see how you do on, you got a 5.
Well, I'm going to talk about a quarter versus the full year now. And also, yeah, next time we'll have our auditors with Clifton Larson Allen here. So I'll maybe yield some of my time this meeting to them next time, because it'll be probably a 20-30 minute presentation next time. So
Okay.
won't do too much on finance stuff back-to-back meetings. So, but I wanted to bring them, seeing we are getting through the early part of the year here, the first quarter report. As with most years, or pretty much all years, our revenues first few months of the year usually are come in relatively slow. Our taxes don't come till the summer, the June, July timeframe. We get those twice a year, in summer and December. So pretty much right now it's some of the building permit revenue, drug task force revenue, which I know Councilmember McGregor had asked if we had gotten some dollars, there, and we just heard the presentation from Chief Falls as far as the drug task force and the important part they provide. So we did get some of those dollars in the early part of this year. We are starting to see our market value, as probably people are seeing in their individual accounts, the market's starting to moderate a bit, so we're not seeing as much negative market adjustments in the for our investments, which is good, and hopefully I guess we'll see where the market goes this year, the rest of the year. As far as on the expenditures, everything I think is going pretty well there also. We spent about 25% when you compare our actual expenditures to the full year's budget. Some things we've paid for the full year as far as like our property insurance, our workers' comp. So you can see those are at 100% or more just based on those items are tended to go up. Those insurance items just based on some of the market factors there. And then I guess one thing you probably saw going through the reports that I notated in the memo is that, and Gary can attest to, our snow ice department. We did have a pretty hard winter, maybe to say mildly, or one of the top, 3 or 4, whatever it is on record, depending on who you talk to, I guess, or what meteorologists or. So hopefully, we'll have, November, December and stuff. Maybe, I think I was joking earlier before the meeting, maybe we'll have a brown Christmas, whatever people think of that, right? But, and some of that obviously is offset for the time the public works spends in snow ice. There's a little less in some other areas. So it's sort of balanced out, but there was a lot of overtime costs and additional chemicals and salt and whatever. And that's just part of them doing a good job of keeping the roads clear. So, otherwise, I don't know if anyone, council has any questions. I included the cash and investment totals right in there. We're basically at about $9.3 million across all funds. We did just get our bond proceeds in here and at the end of April, so those will be reflected in the second quarter report and will be obviously set aside and used for the upcoming projects that are starting here for the 2023 street projects, the water main project, et cetera. So, I guess I'll probably stand for any questions. Like right now, nothing to note. Obviously, if anything comes up, I'll bring that, in one of the subsequent quarterly reports if we're starting to trend. Revenues are better than, you always like revenues to be better than you're expecting and expenditures to be less, but that doesn't always happen. So, but we'll keep the council abreast either way, so.
So, Brian, just real quick, there's 2 things. There's the road maintenance fund of 1.1 million, and then there's the street improvement capital projects at 333,000. Or nearly 334. So the street capital projects, those are what we're doing, the mill and overlays and the reclamation and all of that.
Actually, so the road maintenance fund is pretty much what we've done. Pretty much, we started back in 2012 and have grown that balance to basically do our different projects that we
Okay, so
budgeted
that's the actual capital projects
Yeah,
that we're
the
doing.
actual-
So it's I'm wondering if it should be labeled a little differently.
And it could. I think we used to just have the 490 fund, and a lot of the balance in that fund is just old escrows from when these developments came in and for
Right.
seal coating escrows and stuff. So we probably could, basically the road maintenance fund has actually become our more, where our capital expenditures.
Capital expenditure fund, and
Yeah,
that's
our
what I'm
current-
wondering.
yeah.
If we shouldn't relabel it because it's confused.
Yeah.
It
The other thing we
sounds-
could do is even maybe just do a resolution to merge those 2 funds. That might even be the best. We still would have the escrows out there as far, but we could basically bring it as one pot of money together, I guess.
Well, what
Or
are,
just,
yeah.
or just make 490 just the street escrow fund and then take out anything that's not escrow and put it
Oh.
into
Right.
the other one.
That'd be another way to, yeah, maybe that would.
I think that would be clearer.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna get at, is do the escrow separate,
Okay.
and call that the
Like the
escrow
fund.
fund, and
Okay.
then do the road maintenance
Capital project.
/ capital projects and have all the other
Okay,
funds in
yep.
there.
No, I think that sounds like a
Is
good
that-
idea. Yep.
Peter, you may be more of a numbers person, or,
No, that makes sense to me too.
okay.
Okay, yep, we'll do that and relabel that, and yes, and there's like, I think 20,000 of actual fund balance in that other fund, we'll move that over.
There's like
That's-
23,000,
Yeah.
whatever, and so I
Everything else
thought,
is
well,
pretty-
that's really skewed, so yeah, if we could do that, that would be great.
Okay, yep, we can do
And then
that.
the only other comment I have is, the stormwater fund, that seems to be getting up there really high, and so we need to keep an eye on that, because do we have a CIP for that, Gary?
Yes.
Okay,
The other factors too that, with all the projects too, we do use some of that money for
right,
the redoing of the catch basins, curb lines and that type stuff. And, this year especially in
Right,
the
on
other
Morning
area,
View.
we'll be using it up for adding new drainage through there, so.
so I just want to make sure when we talk budget, maybe that we also get a CIP for that. so that we can see, because that's part of our fees, recycling fee and stormwater fee, that I want to make sure that we're not overcharging or undercharging, so. All right, that's the only comment I have.
I have a question. Historically, what does it cost in, say, November and December for the snow removal? I mean, how much of a shortfall are we maybe looking at?
Boy, that's hard to, you know, that all the biggest factor is how much snow are you gonna get and how many times are we out?
Yeah.
I mean, we've increased now our presence out there. This year was the first year we really done that, which I'm happy about. I think we did a lot better job. We were out there more, you know, putting down more chemical to, you know, to keep the roads cleaner, safer, out there. But I mean, normally we're out for probably on average 12 to 14 times a year. This time we're close to 20. So it was quite a number. I mean, a lot of it was ice storms, and that's what kills it. I mean, we went through. We had ordered 422 tons of salt this year. We used almost everything we had there. Plus, we started off with almost probably 90 to 95 tons in the barn already, and we have roughly maybe 30 tons left. So it's quite a bit. I mean, ice storms are just the you know, that's the killer. So along with that, and then chipping gravel roads where you live on that, we go through and chip them. We went through a tremendous amount of chips this year on them. So, but you know, I mean, I think most years were pretty close. This year just happened to be,
Yep.
you know,
22
the
was
opposite.
tough, and now 23, just based on these, you know, obviously, even last year. I mean, I think on average, it seems like, I mean, if this is a fair statement, Gary, November, December usually hasn't been too bad. It's usually that January
That
through March.
January.
Correct.
March,
And this year we got
Yeah.
we
hammered
actually
early and
really
it kept
and
going.
often, yeah, right,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, but I can look back in the budget trends a few years, you know, 3-5 years ago, and some years we only spend 70,000-80,000 here, but then it can be 150,000. It's just the weather. Obviously, it's weather dependent, so you can.
Right.
Yep.
But that's the other reason it's good to have a healthy fund balance, so that when we do end up with overages like this, unexpected overages, then we then obviously tap into our fund balance, and that's why it's really good to have a healthy one, as well as it helps our bond rating, as you know from last month. So, all right, yeah, good question though. Yeah. Anyone else? Otherwise, looks good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we don't have anybody here for under persons to be heard. Consent agenda items, any that you need to remove? Otherwise, they consist of A, approve our work session meeting minutes from April 17th, 2023, approve our city council regular meeting minutes from April 17th, 2023, accept the resignation of Mark Henning from the Minnetrista Planning Commission as an alternate, and then we have approve a replacement of our public safety vehicles. E is approve our task order number 5 agreement with AE2S for water system planning, and then we have F, which is a resolution approving our claims, and G is approving a rear yard setback for Richard and Margaret Trenery at 4745 Baycliff Road. Is there a motion to approve consent agenda items A through G?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Refkin. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. McGregor. Any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 4-0. And then we have public hearings. There is nobody here, but I officially have to open the public hearing. So I'm going to open the public hearing. And David, do you want to say anything? I mean, might as well.
Sure, Madam Mayor and members of council, I can quickly just announce that the Park Place Storage facility has made a request that the city vacate a portion of the drainage and utility easements along the westerly property line of Lot 2, Block 1 of Nike Storage. So we're following the Minnesota statute and holding this public hearing per the request of the applicant. What we can do is hold the public hearing, take any comment. We have a resolution before you this evening to adopt, which would then indeed vacate those drainage and utility easements. As pointed out in the staff report, there was some sort of error that was done between the construction drawings and the plat that got discovered when they went down to actually record the CIC plat, their common interest community plat. And when that was discovered, the easiest thing to do would be to remove one of the property lines and actually adjoin two parcels, which would fix the problem of this building being within that drainage and utility easement. So hence the request for the vacation of the drainage and utility easement. If this is approved by the council this evening, the applicant would then follow up with a lot combination form, which then gets signed by administratively by city staff. We also then have a new easement that would be recorded around the perimeter of all the properties that the applicant is giving to us for the city. So that is the process. That's where we're at. Again, it was an error that somewhere between the construction drawings and the plat. You've already opened the public hearing, so once you've taken any comment, we do have a resolution to vacate those easements for Nike storage, subject to the conditions in the resolution.
All right. Well, we don't have anybody here, so I'm going to close the public hearing at this time. I just have a quick question. I want to make sure that they follow through and then redo the lot lines and all of that. Is there something that would compel them to do that?
Well, they're in the construction process, so we most certainly have a lot of control right now in terms of our inspections and
Okay.
issuing a certificate of occupancies.
Okay, yeah,
Madam Mayor, also, the vacation is conditioned upon.
okay.
the
That's what I was
yeah,
wondering,
so
if it was.
They basically can't get that recorded until we say we've got our easement and all the
Okay.
conditions have been met.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, there's a resolution to approve the vacation of a certain portion of the drainage and utility easement within the plat of Nike Storage.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Vickery. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. McGregor. Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 4-0. And our I believe only one business item this evening is a resolution. It's regarding the authorizing the publication of ordinance number 482 by title and summary. We discussed this at our work session last time, so I'll hand it over to Ms. Vowski, and you can kind of fill us in briefly. And
Thank you, Mayor Whalen, members of council. Just as a quick summary, the proposed ordinance brought forward this evening for consideration is in response to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, or MS4 permit. Now, this permit was issued initially many years ago, and they went through some updates recently. And so in order for the city to be compliant with this MS4 permit, there are some ordinance updates that are presented this evening for council consideration. They basically consist of ordinance language necessary to address post-construction stormwater management, chloride reduction, and animal waste. And the first two, the post-construction stormwater management and chloride reduction, those practices are already being implemented. And then the animal waste section is basically what a responsible pet owner should do and pick up after their pet. So we did have some discussion at the last work session, and council gave staff some good direction as far as a couple clarifications, and I can quickly go through those. The first one is with regards to language that it was included to allow for an exemption if volume reduction rates would not be required if the practices were not cost effective. And the council was concerned that there were no parameters around that language. And so we've gone ahead and removed that language and don't anticipate that the Pollution Control Agency would have any challenges with that language either. The other two components that were brought forward, again, for the council consideration is actually within the existing ordinance. So what happened was when we were looking at getting the ordinance updates for the MS4 permit, took a look at the city attorney's office made the good suggestion to have a stormwater chapter in its entirety. And so we moved some language in the existing ordinance under this new ordinance. And with that, there was some good questions that came up under the existing ordinance language that I've brought back for clarification. The first one was defining a pollutant, and specifically it lists pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers. And the question was, these are things that are applied to a residential lawn. And there was a question over whether or not this ordinance would put residents in violation of the ordinance by putting those on their lawn. I consulted with the city attorney on this, and the discussion was that since the definition of pollutant is very broad and nothing within the ordinance was specific that would render a homeowner in violation by applying those on their personal lawn, that there wasn't a concern that a homeowner would be in violation of that section of the code. So we're recommending to leave that as is.
So in other words, Ms. Fauske, if a resident applies it to their lawn, that's fine. But if they took a bag of fertilizer and dumped it down the storm drain, then they might be in violation of the
That is
ordinance.
correct.
Okay, just,
Good example.
thank you.
The second one is with regard to definition of waters of the state, which includes, in that definition includes irrigation systems. And so the city's ordinance refers to Minnesota statute, which includes irrigation systems and doesn't further define that. And so again, the council's concern was, we don't want, does our ordinance imply that a residents' irrigation system is now a water of the state? And we had some discussion of, was the intent that it would be agricultural irrigation systems? So the city attorney's office took a look into that, and there weren't any case law or administrative decisions that would interpret what an irrigation system was. And so similar to the definition for pollutant, looking at the ordinance, the attorney's office indicated that there wasn't anything within our ordinance that would imply that a homeowner's or a residential irrigation system would fall into that category. And so we're proposing to leave that definition as is so that it's remains consistent with state statutes.
I had a question on that. I was wondering, would it make sense or would it be okay to say agricultural irrigation systems, just so that it's clear, since it's sort of implied by state statute? I mean, does that make sense?
I suppose we could. I guess the question becomes, when we're defining water of the state consistent with the state, and do we have the authority, or is it within our purview to define water of the state according to Minnetrista city code, or should we default to the state's definition of water of the state?
Okay.
That's my concern of, varying from the state's definition.
Okay.
Do you know anything about it, or are we allowed to deviate from the state's?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I believe this provision, isn't it also something that's required by the MPCA, or?
This is part of the current code, and so I would venture, and by happenstance, I found the exact same definition of water estate looking at another community's city code. So I would venture to guess that this is a requirement under the current code, but I would have to go and take a look into that.
Yeah, my only concern is that if this is something that the state requires us to have, similar to the MS4 language that's earlier in the ordinance, that if we're changing it, the state may have an issue with that. I mean, I did thoroughly review the ordinance, and it does not come up in the context of a residence, that term irrigation system. So I'm comfortable with it still being in there, even though it is vague and there is no definition of it in the statute. But
I mean, I don't think we've ever had an issue with it here in the city that I can recall.
Not in my experience, no.
Okay.
I just had one other question about it. It's on page 65, where it talks about normal wetted perimeter means the area of a conveyance such as a ditch or channel that is in contact with water during flow events that are expected to occur from a 2-year 24-hour storm event. So does this mean that if an area is dry 99% of the time, but then it gets flooded in 24 hours and it's considered a normal wetland perimeter?
Wetted perimeter. So this is meant to Madam Mayor, if I may answer the question, the wetted perimeter, so it's an area that, like a 2-year, 24-hour storm event, I would have to look at what the frequency is of that. But a wetted perimeter, what they're referring to is simply, as it states, a ditch or a channel. So it's saying what area is touched by water on that ditch. And so your question was with regards to with a wetland or?
Well, could it be considered just an area that is dry 99% of the time unless it happens to rain a lot in 24 hours once every few years?
That's
You know,
correct.
like this, so
Yep.
someone could have completely dry land for
Well,
years and then suddenly it's wet and it's considered a normal wetted perimeter?
Correct. I think the intent here is to define it as if this is an area that is necessary to convey flow. And so they've just made a definition as to what parameters are in place to say, yeah, this is a conveyance system versus, you know, regular overland flow.
it could be a type 1 wetland. It could be, which is what you're describing, a type 1 wetland, for instance, could be 98% of the time dry. But at times during heavy rainfalls, it could has some water in it. It could also be a floodplain. You know, where again, 90% of the time it might be dry, but it might be in a floodplain. So I think my guess is that they want to make sure that people understand that even if it's dry, it could potentially be a potential source of drainage. I mean, is that?
I'm trying to look at where it references it within the code section, and it's not jumping out at me. But I think the idea is that it has a, without seeing the context, it's hard to say what the. So yes, so it's essentially meant to say, like, it's an area that's normally dry during this 2-year, 24-hour event. That's when it's wet. That's what's defining the wetted perimeter.
Mm-hmm.
So anything below that storm event, that 2-year, 24-hour
Wouldn't
event
be.
would not be the
In that.
wetted perimeter. It would be less than anything above that event would be excessive, would be in excess of the wetted perimeter.
Okay. Well, I mean, a lot of this, it's good questions because, I mean, it's somewhat ambiguous at times. You think, what in the world does that mean? So I think it's good that we understand what it means. So that's
Yeah, and
great.
actually, that's the thing about ordinances. We had talked a little bit last time. If the council doesn't review an ordinance in depth and ask the questions, who's gonna do it?
Right.
So we have to.
Right. Oh, you're right. Good. All right. So with that then,
I had a
yeah.
question. I just know, it just seems to refer to pets and like on page 72. What about like agricultural, or maybe horses or pets? I don't know.
My understanding is that this was meant to, when you look at what an MS4 community is. So Minnetrista is at a size of the community and with enough development, with enough stormwater facilities to constitute an MS4 system. I would venture to guess that there aren't a lot of communities like Minnetrista that would have an agricultural component to that because this ruling wouldn't necessarily apply to like a township, for example.
So they'd be more like.
Well, I don't think these rulings would apply to rural areas.
Correct.
Put it that way. So,
Yes.
so for instance, these, I mean, you can say it's going to apply overall in Minnetrista, but it's primarily designed to address developments.
Developed areas.
Yeah.
Yes.
And developed areas.
Where you-
Rural areas wouldn't have the stormwater.
Right.
The conveyance systems, the pipes and the
Yeah.
ponds, et cetera. Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
Okay.
And our nuisance ordinance covers animal waste on the rural properties, doesn't
I don't think so.
Yeah, I
Does-
thought it covered.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
so that's
Yeah.
covered
That's
somewhere
covered
else.
somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
yeah. Yeah, we don't, again, I think the MS4 is more for development in developed areas versus like nuisance, that would address some other areas in the city or the whole city, but yeah. All right, good, yeah, good questions, good comments. So with that, then, are we on board then with the changes? Then we can authorize the publication. First of all, we need to approve the ordinance. So we'll do this in two motions. Is there a motion to approve ordinance number 482 as presented and discussed here this evening?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Refkin. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Vickery. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 4-0. And then I need a resolution or a motion to authorize publication of ordinance number 482 by title and summary only.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. McGregor. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Refkin. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 4-0. So I want to thank staff as well as council because I think this is an important ordinance and thank you for all those good questions. Yes, but that's good. So next, I'm going to, staff reports, I don't think we have any. I'll make a few quick announcements. We have a cleanup day coming up this Saturday. Gates will open at 8. It's from 8 to 3 this coming Saturday, May 6th, I think that is. And then coming up later on in the month, Trista Day is May 20th. And then also the bus tour, June 6th. If you haven't RSVP'd, please do so. I know seats are filling up quickly. Also, if council wants to go, let Ally know. And then the other thing is the State of the City address was held on April 18th. It was very well attended. And thank you all for coming. Great to see you all. And yeah, it was a great turnout, really great turnout. It was a good event, a beautiful location at Burl Oaks this year. Again, many thanks to them for allowing us to host it there, much nicer than here at City Hall. They did a great job. So other than that, we will be meeting for the Personnel Committee next week and bringing forward recommendation for Jasper's one-year review. And there's a lot of other things going on, and I'll report on those next time. Because they're going to happen next week, so then I'll report on those next week. Anybody else?
I will be attending the Personnel Committee meeting next week, and then I have the Mound Fire meeting on Thursday morning that I will be attending.
Okay, so
Thursday
we'll,
the 11th.
yeah, we'll get an update on the 15th, 16th then. Okay.
Nothing going on with the Gillespie Center right this second. I mean, there's lots going on as far as events, but nothing to.
Okay. Good.
I was not able to attend the Pioneer Sarah Creek watershed meeting, but Don Chamberlain filled in for me. And that was exciting because they approved the alum treatment for whale tail.
Mm-hmm.
And it came in 30,000 under bid. And unfortunately, there was just one bid, so it came in under and they took it. So that's really exciting. And they'll have to do that treatment again next year, but they have about 405,000 total for that project. So this one came in at, let's see, 183. So they, depending on what happens next year, they should be okay for next year too. And then the other thing was there was on Kingswood Road, the Three Rivers Park District has some land where there's a tamarack forest that's getting damaged by runoff, and so they're looking at what they can do there. Stay tuned on that.
Okay. Yeah, I ran into, I saw Brian Flatch from Three Rivers. I attended the Three Rivers State of the Park address. And so he was saying he's going to be applying for some grant dollars and everything, some other things for that alum treatment. But we've been waiting for this for a long time, so it'll be good to have that done. And I think our participation they're estimating at around 15,000 for both years. So about 7,500 this year and 7,500 next year, and that'll come out of our stormwater fund.
Oh.
So, and glad that Pioneer Sarah will be participating because we have been paying in as members to that organization for many years. So that'll be nice to get something back. But yeah, so it was good to get that update too. But great, thank you so much, Peter, for that.
Ally, are you gonna post the opening for the planning commission alternate then?
Yes, it's on my to-do tomorrow.
And we still have openings on the Park Commission too.
We do,
So,
yeah.
We actually, Madam Mayor, we have a couple applications that came in. We'll probably be interviewing at your next meeting for the Parks Commission.
great.
We did get a couple in.
Okay, good.
I also do need someone for the May 22nd Planning Commission meeting. We are gonna have a meeting. We do have one application that came in.
Okay. I'm not available that evening.
I'm out of town.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, that's right.
Peter gets
Peter.
Oh, shoot, I turned this on.
I can do June if you have something in June.
Okay, I'll tentatively say yes. and see if it's subject
All right.
to-
Sounds good. We can check. We've got another meeting before too.
Okay.
So,
Sounds
see
good.
if Claudia maybe can.
I know she attended. If Peter can, that'd be great because I
Yeah.
don't think you've been to one yet this year.
No, I haven't.
So, and then again, if June rolls around, I think I can do June. All right. All right. With that then, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Refkin. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Vickery. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Almost record time. No.